Hello YouTube. So today's video will be a video response to not one, oh no, but 5 videos done by ThickShades0. Let's get started.
And you. But God cannot do what is logically impossible. He cannot make a square circle or a one-ended stick. So can God make a rock so big that he can't lift it? No. So what if, when God created human beings, he wanted them to be free? Freedom's a good thing. But if humans are to be free, they cannot be forced to obey God. Because freedom without choice is like a square circle. It's a logical contradiction. No choice, no freedom. God didn't want robots. He wanted real people. The first humans endowed with the awesome power of free choice abused their freedom. The tragic consequences of their bad choice and our bad choices ripple across the world. God is responsible for the fact of freedom, but humans are responsible for their acts of freedom. But let's remember, we don't suffer alone. God will put an end to suffering and evil. And God became a man to suffer with us. God is good, and he wants real people, like you, to know him. But the free choice is yours.
Okay, I agree that freedom is a good thing, but that's not really freedom you described, but rather tyranny of sorts. And what do I mean by this? Well, let's take an example. I will give you the option to give me $1,000, or I'll put a gun to your head and shoot you. Yeah, I'm giving you free will. You can either choose to give me $1,000, or you can choose a bullet in your head. That's still a choice, right? So yeah, that's essentially what God does. It's either my way, or I let you suffer for eternity. Pick your poison, motherfucker. And if you want to quantify God as something that surpasses human beings, that surpasses us in knowledge, in power, in benevolence, then you have to also accept that God's personality and God's emotions are also above human understanding. Which is to say that you cannot say that God suffered alongside us, because God's concept of suffering is essentially different from ours. So you can't have it both ways. Next.
This is Robespierre. He lived 200 years ago in France. He liked to think and use words like reason and rational, just like Sam and Richard. But he also liked to kill people who disagreed with him. He wasn't nice like Sam. Robespierre had people who worked for him. When they were in business, they were known as the Reign of Terror. They weren't nice either. Robespierre cared about people and wanted them to be reasonable too, but some people just wouldn't listen. Maybe if more people decide to listen to Sam and Richard, we could all be more reasonable and rational like Robespierre. Maybe we could even have our own reign of terror for people who continue to be irrational and believe silly storybooks like the Bible.
Wow, what a totally supported and unbiased opinion of yours. Way to overgeneralize Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris with the actions of a murderer. If God doesn't exist, everything is permitted. Really, because it does seem like everything is permitted already, regardless of whether a God or God exists. I suppose God seems to want his own people to rape children. Otherwise we wouldn't have those Catholic priests fondling those cute little altar boys, now would we? So, by your logic, does that give me grounds to say all Christians are child-molesting rapists? Yeah, I didn't think that logic would fly with you, so don't think that you can pull that shit over on me. Next.
Please give me one reason why my argument is not valid, and that is, in order to write the Bible, you must be inspired by God. In order to be inspired by God, you must have God in the first place.
Oh, I'll do better than just give you one reason. I'll give you 3. Your logic here is completely circular, and that's the first reason why your premise fails. So, to support your argument, you state that, first of all, in order for someone to write something, they must be inspired by something first, which I'll grant you. And then you go on to say that the Bible was therefore inspired by God. That's your first argument. Your second argument, which follows that, goes that there must therefore be a God who inspired the creation of the Bible. Do you not see the obvious flaw? You state that the Bible was inspired by God. Well, what proof is there that God really exists? Well, because it says so in the Bible, and because God inspired the creation of the Bible. Yeah, and what proof is there that the Bible is in any way accurate? Well, because the Bible is inspired by God. Yeah, circular logic. Reason number 2. What you've essentially proven is that, yes, the people who wrote the Bible, these desert nomads who wrote the Bible, were inspired by something. You just can't exactly prove that it was your God, and you have no evidence to back it up. And the third and my final reason is, well, why was the Bible created? Well, I'll offer you an explanation because you might not buy the first 2 points, but you might at least see some credibility if I present my point. And why I believe the Bible was created was because these people saw things that they misinterpreted, which was very common back then in history. Seeing as they lack the scientific insight that we now have today, it's not a far stretch of the imagination to see that these people might have misinterpreted several things that they saw. When it comes down to it, the human brain is extremely susceptible to delusion, and especially with the minds of scientifically illiterate, actual illiterate, desert nomads, then their accuracy of the claims cannot really be trusted. Next video.
I don't have any malicious intent, meaning I don't have to lie for my gains. If I were to lie, for example, I wouldn't probably do that for my gain. So if anybody to accuse me of lying anything that I say that I wasn't, you can pretty much assure that I wasn't lying. So my challenge is that people who ask me or ask anybody who who ask me about the evidence of God, for example, the Bible, okay, disprove that. How could you disprove the Bible?
Do you want to know exactly how many versions of the Bible there are? And yes, they are all completely different. Might I also mention that there are several different branches, even within Christianity, which all worship different things from one another. In fact, sometimes they are contradictory. So you can't exactly say that they are all one and the same. Besides, people have been spewing crap for over thousands of years, and just because it might be the same sounding crap as it was 1,000 years ago doesn't mean that it lends it any sort of validity or credibility. Many people thousands of years ago seem to think that the Earth was flat. Yeah, there are still flat earthers here today, so does that mean that the Earth is flat? And disprove the Bible? Do you really want me to go there? Next. The same old tired argument that is just enveloped in the overwhelmingly putrid scent of brand new fallacies. So for anyone who has a modicum of intellectual honesty, you will see that this guy is wanting atheists to provide negative proof. Essentially, what proof and evidence do you have that the Bible isn't correct? For your information, the burden of proof is not on atheism to prove that your God doesn't exist or that the Bible isn't true. It is on Christians to prove that their Bible is true and that their God is real. Positive proof accounts for everything in the academic arena, and negative proof accounts for absolutely jack shit. Even if I couldn't provide any sort of evidence to prove that your deity doesn't exist, that doesn't mean that your deity does exist. Absence of evidence is not equal to evidence of absence. And you wonder why people don't want to debate with you, ThickShades0. Anyways, thanks for watching, and may the truth always be heard.